Welcome to the show that teaches you the things your parents and teachers are too afraid to, the heliosblog. Today, well, on Piers Morgan Uncensored, they're talking about it. Donald Trump riding high in the polls right now. Will he get a clean sweep? Let's see.
The reason she's alone is because she's difficult.
Women are not accepting the bare minimum.
Women fuck men they respect.
All the women who say things like, I'm strong, independent, I don't need no man, like, y'all impress me.
Women just gaslight each other and say what they want to hear.
First rally I've ever been to of Donald Trump's. I must say, I didn't feel like I was at a Nazi movement rally. Did you?
No, not at all. I mean, when you look at this rally, just President Trump able to fill in New York, a blue state, not only did he fill the stadium, everybody outside. That was an unbelievable accomplishment. What really failed in this process is some staffer on Trump's campaign that allowed a comedian to go there. So you gave the Democrats an opportunity to try to attack it. But what I have found is here we are in the final weeks, the closing message. President Trump's on message, but if you are looking, Kamala Harris has spent more than $1 billion. I don't know the three things she would do if she was elected. Bill Clinton was right when he gave Hillary Clinton advice in 2016. You ought to get up to Wisconsin and Michigan. I'm seeing a lot of Trump signs. He knows how to win races. I think his advice is very clear to Kamala Harris. She has wasted $1 billion. She hasn't found her voice. It's kind of a desperation when you go to Nazis, Hitler, and all that, and it doesn't sell well. And when you start your campaign about joy and you have a whole convention about joy, this is not the place you want to end. This shouldn't be your closing argument. And it's a sign that if you're looking from the outside, she's not doing well in the polls, and it looks like she'll probably lose.
Uh-oh.
You referenced there the so-called joke by Tony Hinchcliffe. It was interesting because Jon Stewart today, there's a clip I was watching from him last night where he talked about this, and he put it in some context. So this guy is he's an infamous roaster. He was at Tom Brady's roast, and he said some stuff there which made this look like a tea party. So they kind of knew what they were putting on the bill. I agree with you. It was a pretty stupid decision to have a guy like that because that's what he's going to do. But having taken that decision, how damaging do you think it will be? I mean, there's a lot of people obviously getting very angry about the insult to Puerto Rico. There are a lot of Puerto Ricans, for example, in Pennsylvania. Could this kind of thing be genuinely damaging or not?
I don't think it changes any of the outcome. Look, President Trump has denounced it. He's not been a part of it. What it does, it takes away for how big an event that New York event was, to be able to go in there, go to California before as well. I don't think there's an undecided voter in America. Who's going to win is who brings out the low propensity voters. So what you really have to look at is the early votes. Republicans had been holding their votes back to only on election day. They're doing much better than they had in 2020. I don't know if the polls have improved, but if you take the polls from 4 years ago, 8 years ago, President Trump is in a much stronger place. If you look at whoever wins this presidential election, I hope they win not just electoral college, but they win the popular vote too, so we don't stay divided. When you win elections about ideas, you have a much stronger ability to govern. And I would say, look at President Trump's press conference today. He's talking about inflation, he's talking about the border, and he's talking about foreign policy. Those are really the top issues in America, and it's the issues that he leads on. And I think that's going to drive more voters. She's running a campaign where 40% of her voters aren't voting for her, they're just voting against President Trump.
Yeah, it's idiotic. It's the way to lose, right? If both sides are talking about the same person, it's over.
That's a hard way to win if you're just running against somebody. Presidential elections should be aspirational. They should be, what would the next 4 years look like? Where can you take America?
Indeed.
And I think at this moment in time, that's a reason why President Trump is leading. But it really all comes down to Pennsylvania. You know, in the last presidential election, it was decided by less than 50,000 votes, 48,918 votes. That's how many votes President Biden won by because of the Electoral College. So there's no telling, is this another undercount with Trump? Are the polls right? And who gets the most voters out, especially the low propensity voters, because the intensity level is high on both sides.
I was speaking to a pollster yesterday who said it's not completely fanciful that Trump could end up winning the presidency and Republicans could win not just the Senate, but also the House and the popular vote. That it could be a complete clean sweep. I mean, do you think that is realistic?
That's crazy.
Is that a possibility?
Crazy.
Is it possible? Yes, it is possible, because Trump will carry exactly what he carried last time, but he'll probably pick up Georgia. Arizona's looking very good. Nevada, unbelievable in the early votes. Republicans are leading, someplace that we'd be behind by almost 50,000 votes. But if he picks up Pennsylvania, the Senate, I believe the Republicans have already won. The House is unique, whereas we've won the last two cycles when Democrats were winning everything else. But it's easier to win for Republicans this time in the House, but unfortunately something has flipped on us. The Democrats have raised more money. And so it really could come down to where these candidates, there's about 20 seats that are about tied, and President Trump's, he's polling higher than the candidates themselves. He could pull everybody across the line. And it could be like a 1980 where the polls were very close, Carter was in the head, and you woke up the next day and it was a big sweep that, not across all those other ones, but Ronald Reagan won in a much bigger electoral vote than anyone had thought possible.
We have two things in common, Kevin, which you may not be aware of. The first one, certainly, which is you were born 63 days before me in 1965. So you're going to turn 60 in January, 2 months before me. That makes me very happy. And the second thing we have in common is that after January the 6th, you were very scathing about Donald Trump. I want to play a clip from you at the time, but then I'll explain why I'm in the same camp as you. So let's take a listen to this.
I've had it with this guy. What he did is unacceptable. Nobody can defend that, and nobody should defend it.
I wrote columns and said on air pretty similar stuff. I'd had it with him too. I thought that this was beyond the pale. I couldn't see any way back. And I thought that was the last we'd probably see of Donald Trump in political circles. I was asked yesterday in an interview with me by somebody, well, what made you change your mind? And I sort of went into a quite lengthy explanation about why I think he should be allowed to run for president again and may well win. What is your explanation? Having said he's done after January the 6th, how do you justify it to yourself that you're now so full square behind it?
Well, that's easy. That was a clip of not an interview I was doing. It was a phone call that they didn't tell you the whole answer out or the whole question before. I'm frustrated with January 6th. I don't support anything that happened on January 6th that day. But you also learned a lot more information after that time period. You learned that Nancy Pelosi was offered 10,000 National Guard troops, that I was the Republican leader at the time. The Sergeant of Arms never came to me or warned me. Pelosi never went before to know where it was. They hadn't had the training. They had all the riot equipment locked in a bus before. So when you have the after look at what's happening, that day never should have happened for a lot of different reasons. The thing I think about President Trump, when you look at where America was, the standing in the world, and just the strength of America from an economy, from a border, from foreign policy. We've looked at the missteps in Afghanistan by Biden. We looked at 5 embassies being evacuated. Look at our base in Africa being given to the Russians. We're looking at inflation we haven't seen since the 70s, a wide open border. It's easy to see why President Trump's policies are so much stronger, and it also sees why President Trump is a more improved candidate this time, and he would be a more improved president, even how well he did the time before.
If he loses...
Again, the only thing we have to worry about is Trump deteriorating like Biden did, right? That's the only real worry, right? Obviously, he's going to promote big business like he's always done, and, you know, that's life, right? But it won't be woke garbage either.
And it's hypothetical, obviously. But if he loses, would that be the end of MAGA as a controlling movement in the Republican Party?
No, I think the policies about MAGA, Make America Great Again. Remember, that started with Ronald Reagan. But But I don't think I don't think the movement just gets handed off to the next person. Trump is very unique. When he ran, no one gave him a chance. He had not run for any other office before. That's just what's so unbelievable, that he can rise up and become president running against 17 other people. You also see all the attacks he has taken, right? They try to put him in jail. They prosecute him. Everything, they go after him. I don't know that anybody else has that willpower. The Republicans doesn't shift all the way back, but the Republicans are in a unique place. Like in the 1900s, they became a little more isolationist. I'm not that way. I think the president has united not just the Republicans, but all of America about the threats of China. You can't just give something away, what they've been able to steal. It's not the idea that we are capitalists. We believe in a free market, but we also believe in a fair market. You've got to let American products into your markets, and can't just give America away that anybody can enter here. We all firmly have believed in an immigration system that actually works, but we believe in a safe border as well. I think those fundamental principles will stay, but I think we'll still continue to evolve and debate on the strongest of ideas.
One of the criticisms of Trump is that, you've had all these people that work for him, including a number of generals, who've now come out and said he's a danger, he's a fascist, etc. When you add them all together, it's a large group of people that were right with him through his first term in office. And his critics say, look, if even the people that were around him, who were of this caliber, are all saying he shouldn't be allowed to be at the White House again, then he shouldn't be. What do you say to those people?
Look, what I see from a lot in that first term, it's just like 10,000 hours. He had never served before, so he was just taking recommendations from people. It's not till his like a second year in office did he really get humming in the process of doing the job, understanding and knowing it. He knows it much better now, and he's got to have the right person work with him. And remember, he's trying to change an entire country that the whole establishment was working against him. No have we've ever seen when he's working with foreign leaders that they leak his phone calls, right? How do you build a relationship there? They create a whole fake Russia collusion part going after him the whole time he's trying to govern. I think this time he won't waste one day. I think he'll find the very best people will work with him, and I think they'll be more in sync. I mean, I'm a big believer in Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. You got to get the right people on the bus, but in the right seats. And that's when you play and stronger, and I believe President Trump will have that this time.
Just finally, Kevin, on election night itself, what is the result, assuming it comes on election night, but what is the place you're looking for where if Trump wins, he's going to win? Is it Pennsylvania? Is it already coming down to that?
To me, it's always been Pennsylvania. I really looked from the very beginning, 3 states, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and North Carolina. Kamala Harris has pulled out of North Carolina, so I think that's there. She's spending a lot of time in Georgia, so I'll watch Georgia. We've lost 3 Senate seats down in Georgia in the last couple elections there. So Republicans can lose statewide, but Governor Kemp has won very big. So let's see how those turn out. The early vote in Georgia looks very good for Republicans, but the one thing I've learned is you can't read in any of these polls. Then I'll look to Pennsylvania, the rural areas, what happens in Philadelphia, because that's where the Democrats get their big markup. And then what about in the rural areas where we go? Wisconsin is unique because he only lost that by 20,000 votes, but if you went back 4 years ago, Biden was leading by more than 6 points, so Trump performed over 4 points better. Then I'll look to Michigan. And all these are close Senate races as well. So watching those races, if he wins Pennsylvania, Georgia, and North Carolina and what he won last time, he doesn't need Arizona. He doesn't need Nevada. All that will be extra. So it really comes down to Pennsylvania.
And if he does win, there are increasing rumors that you may be his chief of staff. Would you take the job if you were offered it?
No. No, I will not be chief of staff. No.
Really? That was definitive.
Really, I don't want the job. I don't think that's the best place, and no, I will not be chief of staff. And personally, I think Susie Wiles has done such an extraordinary job. I would hope he would have Susie Wiles chief of staff. Think about this. Susie has run his campaign when he was being prosecuted, when he had everybody running against him. We had other candidates had more money. She kept the campaign focused. She brought him back and helped him win a primary when everybody was attacking him. She's done an extraordinary job putting a team together that doesn't leak, that has stayed on message. And I think from that point, bring that into the White House, and she has a long-standing knowledge of how to run organizations. You want the very best with President Trump, and I think that combination will actually make the nation stronger and the president himself.
That was very diplomatic answer. Solid. Very, honestly, amazing answer. What a politician.
Great to talk to you. Thank you very much.
What a politician.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me on. Love to come back sometime.
My next guest is one of the biggest podcasters on the planet, but he went viral recently after suggesting it might be time to quit. The founder and CEO of Timcast IRL, Tim Pool, joins me from West Virginia. And opposite him will be the former Ohio State Senator, Nina Turner. Well, welcome to both of you. Tim Pool, let me ask you straight off the top. There's a lot of activity on X today with big YouTube people, with big YouTube followings, all revealing that the New York Times has contacted them with a number of questions suggesting they've been peddling misinformation. I believe you are one of these. What's your response to what's been going on?
I don't think anything of it. These requests come in all the time. It is funny that they're doing this right before Election Day, about a week out. And it seems like, once again, they're going to try and push this narrative of, you know, only the New York Times and corporate news outlets are allowed to have errors or make mistakes, and often not even fact check them. In fact, I'll give you one really great example I love to cite. Politico currently has 2 stories live today. One stating that definitively Ukraine interfered in the 2016 election to assist Hillary Clinton, and another definitively stating that story's false and it's Russian disinformation. So the news outlets are going to, as of right now, be running fake news.
Hilarious.
The only thing I can say for what we do here is every story that we use is cited by a news outlet. So if they take issue with anything we are saying, it's our opinion based on the stories they write.
The irony of this, Tim, it seems to me, is this comes at a time when the biggest news story from this election in the last 48 hours has been this relentless attack on Donald Trump for being the new Hitler and for him holding a neo-Nazi style rally at Madison Square Garden, which I was at, first rally I've been to, and bore absolutely no relation to a neo-Nazi rally, not least because there were lots of Jewish people there and some of them had Israel banners. So to me, there can't be a bigger example of disinformation than trying to pretend Donald Trump is the new Adolf Hitler. Why are the people peddling that not also getting investigated by the New York Times? And what
it's bullshit, of course.
About where mainstream media perhaps is in this election?
Well, we're seeing a lot of corporate outlets running this line, especially attacking Tony Hinchcliffe. And I think it's fair to say, if you've got criticisms of Donald Trump choosing to have a roast comic at his rally, probably not a smart move. But I think it's indicative of having very little left to actually make an argument about. I would prefer to hear anything in terms of plans. I mean, if Kamala would come out and say, definitively, here's one move we will make, I would greatly appreciate that. I can tell you about Donald Trump's arguments, whether or not they'll work effectively in terms of lowering energy prices, which could bring down costs of other goods. I understand what he's saying, and I think this is why we're seeing the polls shift in the direction of Donald Trump. Recently, there was a panel done, I believe it was Mark Halperin, where he asked undecided voters, and one guy just said he's suffering Hitler fatigue or Hitler rhetoric fatigue, and many of the panelists all nodded in agreement that that's all they're saying.
Sad.
Yeah, I mean, Nina, I want to play the clip. So if people haven't seen it, it's been everywhere. But let's play the clip of Tony Hinchcliffe, who's this comedian who actually started the whole Madison Square Garden rally. And he said this about Puerto Rico.
It is absolutely wild times. It really, really is. And, you know, there's a lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico. Okay, all right. Okay, we're getting there. Again, normally I don't follow the national anthem, everybody. This isn't exactly a perfect comedy setup. There's some people here. All right, very good.
Now, Nina, there were two things about this that struck me. I mean, I was there at the time. It fell completely flat. I wasn't even sure what he'd said. I just heard the crowd reaction and thought, well, whatever you've just done, they don't like it and they're not laughing, was the first thing. So from a comedic point of view, it failed. But secondly, as Jon Stewart rather brilliantly pointed out last night, this guy, Tony Hinchcliffe, is a legendary roaster. It's what he does. At Tom Brady's roast recently, which I think was a Netflix or Amazon special, whichever one it was, he just spent the entire time spray gunning absolutely everybody in an incredibly offensive manner, and everybody seemed to find that terribly funny. And Jon Stewart was like, look, I find this guy funny. Sorry, this is what he does. He said it's a bit like inviting Beyonce to your rally, and then she doesn't, and of course the joke was she doesn't sing, which is what Beyonce didn't do at the Kamala rally. Can I just ask you,
no. What?
were you genuinely offended by what he said? And given the context of what Jon Stewart said about what he is, this guy, should we be that offended, or was it just a case of he shouldn't have been hired for that gig?
He should not have been hired for that gig. Environment matters. So there's a difference between going to a roast where everybody that enters knows exactly what the comedian is going to do, and bringing somebody to a political rally when the person that is running, that being the former president of the United States, is trying to win over people from different walks of life. You just don't do that. Now, I will say I heard the gasp too. I wasn't there. You know, you were there. But when I first watched it, I was pleasantly surprised to hear gasp in the room. I think that is a sign that this guy was not accepted. President Trump needs to come out and say that was not appropriate to that moment. He needs to apologize. I know that his campaign did, but it's a difference between the campaign doing something and having the candidate themselves. This man offended people. And yes, it was offensive because we have so much racial animus in this country right now.
Yeah, here we go.
It was ill-advised to have that kind of person there at that kind of rally. And I write about this in Newsweek. It'll be coming out today. I think it is wrong for Democrats or people who lean to the left to be comparing that rally to Nazis, to be calling President Trump adjacent to, or Hitler. They didn't even say adjacent to. It's wrong.
Yeah, it's
and
insane.
It also takes away the very
insane.
American nature of white supremacy. We ain't got to go to Nazi Germany. This country has a long litany from chattel slavery to taking indigenous lands of having its own form of white supremacy and bigotry that we need to deal with. But to compare President Donald J. Trump to Hitler and to say that the people who attended that rally are akin to Nazis is absolutely wrong and extreme. It's very extreme.
You know, I'm so glad you said that, because I feel that very strongly. You know,
Agreed.
I'm not a natural conservative. I'm more of a liberal bent myself. But I just find that constant use of Hitler and Nazis, given how despicable they were, given they murdered 12 million people, they put 6 million Jews into a most heinous Holocaust. The idea that there's any comparison between that and Trump, I just think is,
and Pierce,
it's appalling.
That's another
Tim,
point I want to make.
It's interesting, isn't it?
It's absurd.
It minimizes. I'm sorry for cutting.
Agreed.
It minimizes what really happened.
Literally.
You know, that's another. It's two things. One, it minimizes this country's history, and the other is it minimizes, to your point, what actually happened to millions and millions of people.
Yep.
And it's desperate.
Yeah.
It is a desperate narrative that further divides, and I'm really disappointed that my party would stoop that low. There are other issues to talk about. Let's talk about the economy. Let's talk about people suffering. But you don't have to go there to fight your political.
You don't.
Yeah, like I said, I'm so glad you said that. I mean, there was actually a Holocaust survivor in the audience. And the idea that he has to think to himself, wait a minute, am I at a neo-Nazi rally? Is just offensive. It's obscene.
Agreed.
Tim, on the bigger picture, I just spoke to Kevin McCarthy, who's pretty plugged into the political scene, obviously. And he's very bullish about a Trump win here. He thinks it will all come down to Pennsylvania. But I was also told yesterday by one of the pollsters that it's not inconceivable, if you look at all the polling at the moment, especially in swing states, that Trump could end up winning not just the presidency, but the popular vote, and the Republicans could actually win not just the Senate, which is highly likely, but also the House as well. In other words, they could have a complete clean sweep here.
Yeah, it's
Do you think
crazy.
that is a possibility. And the second question, would it be a good thing for one party to have literally everything?
Well, I think it's a strong possibility, but no one knows. I think everyone's guessing right now. If we look to 2016 and 2020, and then we look at today's polls, I'm not sure the results of 2016 and 2020 matter as much as what the predictions were as to what happened. So in 2016, there was a 3 to 5% bias among, on average, from pollsters in favor of the Democratic Party. That maintained itself largely at the national popular vote level with Joe Biden, though Joe Biden did still perform a little better than Hillary Clinton. He did win. Now what we're seeing is at the Real Clear Politics aggregate of polling, Trump is up 0.1. If any semblance of this bias still exists, that's indicative of a Trump popular vote victory. And then when you look at the swing states, it's actually much worse. 2016 and 2020 saw a Democrat bias once again, but this was ranging from even 4 to 7 points. Right now, Donald Trump is up on the Real Clear Politics average 0.9, indicating he's looking at a major victory across all of the swing states. But
My.
Nobody has any idea what's going to happen. You know, a mistake I made in 2020, I think I was accurately looking at an increase in support for Donald Trump, but what I clearly missed was how interstate migration and COVID was affecting how jurisdictions could flip and could change. So you had many people who were moderate or Democrat leaning moving to more rural areas, and this shuffled everything across the board in ways I think most people didn't predict. Moody's Analytics at one point actually was predicting Trump was going to do very well in 2020. And then, of course, he did improve, but not by enough to defeat Joe Biden. Right now, Gallup, if you look at their polling of the most pressing issue and which party is favored to solve that issue, Republicans have the advantage. And if you follow this polling back to 1952, it is accurate as to which party ends up winning. I think it's fair to say, if you're looking at Polymarket, people are betting on Donald Trump to win. I also think no one has any idea what's going to happen, so everybody just needs to go vote. As to whether or not it's a good thing, well, it's always tough when you have single party control.
It's crazy right now in the United States. Crazy times, guys. Crazy times. But, I mean, ultimately, that's life, right? When is it ever not crazy like this? When is it ever not? So, there it is. Anyway, let's end the video there. Hit the like, hit the sub, hit all for notifications. Buy my books at bit.ly/heliosbooks. You can see the list of the people that bought my books there. Thank you so much for listening, guys, especially if you listen to the end. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.